so this became pretty well known, and a reporter from the Dallas Morning News did a front page article on this, and he called it the recovery defense. And technically it was not a defense, it was a mitigation approach, but he called it the recovery defense, and that name stuck. And other services, wire services, picked it up, and the Wall Street Journal picked it up, and they sent a reporter to do an interview, and USA Today picked it up, and they sent a reporter to do an interview. And so here I was, all of a sudden, I just started out to help people, and I got somewhat famous for this type of approach to the practice of law, the healing approach, and never dreamed that there would be these effects. And so I started getting invited all around the country to train lawyers and judges on the recovery defense. And so I found, even though it was misnamed, I finally just gave up and yielded to that, and let people tell me that I was going to come and talk about the recovery defense when I gave a lecture. And then I realized that although criminal defense was my background, I realized that this mitigation approach would work anytime something bad was going to happen to somebody as a result of their substance abuse or their impairment. So I started branching into family law. If a mother was going to lose her children because of her alcoholism, I started trying those cases using the recovery defense. And another thing that Texas has that only 2 other states have in the nation is we get jury trials in family law cases. And so I was able to, through jury trials, I was able to present this mitigation and keep a lot of parents from losing their children. And the whole thing, again, though, was the idea that first I was a healer and then I was a lawyer. But fortunately, I had realized that I had to have the combination of both the competence and the healing ability to get people into healing, because these were hard cases to try. And I had invested all those hours and days and months and years in seminars and training, so I had become technically a very proficient trial lawyer. And then you combine a proficient trial lawyer with the healing, and it becomes an unbeatable combination. And there's no question that juries pull for underdogs anyway. The American people pull for an underdog. That's why Rocky movie 1 through 14 have been popular, because people like to see underdogs rehabilitate themselves. So it was a theme that really had a universality to it and resonated with juries. And then I also started thinking about the professions, and most of the physicians, dentists, and lawyers that lost their licenses in those days, it was secondary to substance abuse, especially physicians and dentists who in those days had unlimited access to drugs. So I developed another prong of my practice representing physicians and dentists and lawyers before their licensing boards and using the recovery defense there. So after starting this journey in 1977, after practicing impaired for 10 years, by 1987, I had a national reputation as a lawyer healer. And that enabled me to do a lot of speaking and a lot of traveling. And then the next thing came about, though, is I started getting pretty burnt out. I was working pretty hard and trying a lot of cases, and I started working more on myself to deal with the stress of the practice of law. And that's when I started developing a meditation practice for myself and developing some ways to counterbalance the stress of a very large law practice, and continued on into the 90s doing that. And then some interesting things happened in the mid-90s. I had a case in the mid-90s that just dominated my life. It was a very large divorce case, And for 2 years I did nothing but work on that case. And at the end of that case, I didn't have any clients because I hadn't taken any cases for 2 years. So I had time, and I had made a very large fee on that case, so I had money, and I decided to set off on a quest to find out what other ways one could practice law and bring more healing into the law, because all I had been doing thus far is helping people heal and then litigating their cases where necessary. And of course we settled a lot of them too, but we litigated a lot of them. And so I had now time and money on my hands because I literally had no other clients. So I set off on a quest to see what I could see around the world, to see what other things could be brought to bear by somebody that had a healing orientation in the practice of law. And the first thing I did was a month-long trek in Africa in the bush, where I really re-examined all aspects of my life and re-examined especially the warrior orientation, which I had been totally identified with. As a matter of fact, in 1995, D Magazine in Dallas wrote an article about me, and they said there must be two John McShanes. To the people he represents, he is a passionate, spiritual risk-taker and champion of the underdog. To the people that oppose him, he is overbearing, self-righteous, and much too confrontational. And they were exactly right. I was a person who, in the service of helping my clients who had healed overcome their adversity brought about by their condition, I became very self-righteous, and anybody that wanted to put my alcoholic or drug addict in the penitentiary was going to have a very serious fight on their hands. And so when they used those words, overbearing, self-righteous, and much too confrontational, they were right. And because I was a consummate gladiator, street fighter, and it was in '95 that I started, right after that article came out, I started re-examining all those things and wondering if there weren't better ways to do this. Okay, so we're now at '95, and I start re-examining that, and then I finished the big case in '96 and went to Africa in January of '97 and spent a month on this trek, and it was not the Abercrombie and Kent white linen, silver tablecloth type safari. It was a very hard trek where I intentionally subjected myself to a lot of hardship to really get in touch with very basic things. And I was without a fax or a phone or any contact with the outside world for a month, and went hunting and gathering with very ancient tribes that still hunt with poison arrows, and got in touch with an intuitive knowing that there were other ways out there, and I just had to find them.